Okay, good morning from the Holy Land. We're up to Mem Aleph Amid Aleph, the Mishnah. Mem Aleph Amid Aleph, the Mishnah, something we're familiar with. Kol chazaka sheini mataina ein chazaka. Any person who is making a claim of chazaka, I've been on your land for 3 years, and does not have a taina, meaning it's not accompanied by a claim. He just says, I've been on you for 3 years. For example, Ketzad, ein chazaka. Amaloi. What are you doing in my land? And he says, says to him, no one told me otherwise. I was squatting. I went ahead. There was an empty house. I sat in the house or a field, whatever it was, a tree, 3 years. No one said anything to me. Ain't a chazaka. That's not a chazaka, and you would have to go ahead and leave. That's not a chazaka. However, if he goes ahead and says, what are you doing in my land? Or my house, and he says, Shemerchartali, you sold it to me. Shenasatali matana, you gave it to me as a matana. Or Avicham machroli, your father sold it to me. Avicham nasna li matana, or your father gave it to me as a matana. Harizu chazaka. This is a taina. This explains why I'm in the land. Chazaka sheshem taina. It's interesting when sometimes you begin a perek. We knew from day one in the perek you needed a taina. Remember that one is the kashas of from Sharamud. In case if you learn from Sharamud, you should need a taina because Sharamud doesn't have a taina. But throughout the different sugis we've uncovered, comes along this idea of you need a chazaka sheshim or taina. Without a taina doesn't mean anything, right? V'haba mishum Yerusha ein tzarich taina. If someone comes from Yerusha, he doesn't have to bring he doesn't have to have a taina. He doesn't have to claim and prove that his father owned the land. He doesn't have to prove that. Says let's see the Rashbam here. Kol chazaka sheni mataina ein chazaka. Bein b'cheskes gemushanim, whether it's chazaka 3 years, the karkois ubatim v'ilanois. Bein b'cheskes yemechad, even if it's a chazaka of a day, k'gain hanech daminun l'el, we said earlier in the Masechta, achzik l'haridi, right? You go ahead, you use the person's wall, and that was a chazaka for even a day, because the person's not going to go ahead and watch while you go ahead and work use his items. You're using his wall to store bricks. You have to come up and say and claim what gave you the right to be here. You're sitting here. What gave you the right to be here? Even he's making a claim. He says, I have a claim why I'm here, and I stayed on the amount of time the Chachamim said. And the person was quiet, and he didn't go ahead and complain. It's very interesting. This should be, I think, the first Rashbam in the parak. This Rashbam should be the first Rashbam in the parak, right? The concept of, again, the Chachamim made a takana 3 years, right? Up to 3 years, a person watches a star. More than that, he doesn't watch a star, and therefore, if he didn't say something, and you have a claim to explain you being there. Again, why am I here? I received it as a present. I purchased it. Explains my presence there. The fact that I chazaka and you didn't say anything, there's no need for a star. That establishes what? That it's yours. That establishes yours. There's no reisa, like remember the Ramban, your machzik, this is your land, and fartik. Veina ma'ara neman loymar, and the ma'ara, the one who's saying, what are you doing on the land, is not believed to say, lo yadi yarad lekarka shali, you didn't come down to my land. Without rishus, then came why would you leave? Let him stay there and be machzik. We knew once upon a time it belonged to this person who's making the claim, what are you doing on my land? But after 3 years in your silence, you no longer have that right. You lost that right because you should have gone ahead and said something. So this is chazaka, but however, you need a taina. You need a taina. So now let's skip a Rashba, Mishum Yerusha. From the time, the day of his death, it was muchsik, it was his land. And in other words, once upon a time he knew it was your land. But now from the day of my father's death, it was muchsik, that his land. He doesn't have to go ahead and have a taina. Right? He doesn't have to have, the guy can't say, 1 second, everyone who was my land, now you're saying that you inherited from your father. He doesn't have to know how his father acquired the land, guys. He doesn't have to know how his father acquired the land. It's not necessary. That's what it means. He doesn't have to know that. How is father? They ain't know them bucky if a person's not an expert in this. Heich bol yadai. Umiu raya be'edim bo. You need a proof with edim. Shero es aviv huchsik bo yoim echad. V'hacham fash b'gemara. All we would need would be a proof that the father had been muhsik one day. That his father was muhsik at the day that he died. That's all we would need. So again, why does the Mishnah tell us that you need a chazaka? A chazaka needs a taina. A chazaka needs a taina. Without a taina, you have no right to be on the land. However, once you go ahead and once you have a chazaka that you're on a taina that you're on the land, you're good. Once you have a chazaka that you're on the land, you're good. If it's Yerusha, Benji, we're just summarizing the Mishnah. You'll see the Mishnah yourself. It's not a difficult Mishnah. It's speaking about chazaka sheishim. Then you need a taina for a chazaka. So now, if you have a case where you doesn't have to go ahead and claim. Once upon a time you knew the land belonged to Ruvain. Shimon now is on the land. Shimon dies. Shimon's children don't have to have a taina. I know that my father bought it from you. They don't have to know that. All they have to have is a raya that their father Shimon had been on that land for a day. That's it. All you have to know. That's it. Okay? That's our Mishnah. Now, l'chayr it's pashit, guys, that you can't. Why is the Mishnah telling me? You need a taina to explain why you learn. Would you ever have a mina that, again, this is probably people, you might laugh at me. If a guy is squatting on a piece of land or in a house, and you come and you say to the guy, what are you doing in my house? And he says, no one told me otherwise. Would you have a havamina he could stay in that house? Don't answer that question. In I'm not talking about in svara, right? Not in irrational, well, smiling, right? The marshal. It doesn't make any sense. Why would the Mishnah have to tell me this? It seems to be a dover pashut that the guy has to have a legal claim as to why he's in that land, right? Why he's in that house. He has to have a claim. So the Gemara is going to fear rice. Spread the Gemara kasha, pshita. What is pashut? What's he telling me? That a chazaka she'eni mitan is not a chazaka? What are you telling me? It's a dover pashut. Says the Gemara, no, I would have thought the following. Mahu the tema. You know what I would have said? Hi Gavra, Mizvan Zavinle. The guy who's squatting really bought it. The guy who was on there for 3 years, he really bought the land. Mizvan Zavinle Hayara. Ushtara Havile. And he had proof. He had a star. The Irkis. And he lost the star. The Haide Ka'ama Hachi. And the reason he's not saying it, Savar, he says to himself, Iamina Mizva Zavinle Hayara. If I would have gone ahead and said I bought this land, Amrili, they'll tell me, Achve Shtarcha, produce your star. So in other words, he's saying no one said anything to me to cover up his real understanding. This guy is a shtickle amoritz. Because if he really had bought the land after 3 years, he wouldn't need the star. If he really bought the land after 3 years, he wouldn't need the star. But he doesn't know that, right? So he thinks the following. I really bought the land. This is what we would think would happen. He really bought the land, but he lost the star. So he's scared to say that I bought it, because if you bought it, where's your right? Where's your proof? Where's your star? And so what does he say? Hilchak leimele. Okay, that's the havamina. That's the havamina. Good. Continues the Gemara, right? Continues the Gemara. Now the following. The Hilkach Leimala Anon, let us, Bezdin, say, Dilma Shtara Havi Lecho V'Irkis, let Bezdin teach him. Let Bezdin teach him, maybe you had the star and lost it, and now that you're on there for 3 years, there's no problem. Kigoin Zeh Posach Picha Le'ileim. In this case, we would go ahead and open up our mouth for the Ilaim. The Ralbag on Mishlei explains, for the Ani ve'evyoin will go ahead and be tayin. So maybe in this case, this poor guy who had no place else to live, found the place, is living in the place. Maybe Bezdin would go ahead and forward this taina and say, 1 second, he's asking you, what are you doing on his land? And you're saying that what? You're saying no one said anything to me. Maybe Bezdin would say, maybe you had a star and you lost it. That's what you would think. Why? Because Pasach Piches Le'elain, Kamash Malon, that you don't do that. That's the Chiddush over here. The Chiddush over here, if a person says Lahadam, no one said anything to me forever, we're not Paisech Piches Le'elain and give a winning what? A winning taina. Haste this guys. This guy had said clearly what? I had a star and lost it, he'd be believed. Now, the Rashbam asked a question. We know that Tayin, the Einachayz of a Tayin. Once you make your claim, you're not able to go ahead and make another claim. So what did this guy say? This guy said what? I no one said anything to me. So Freg the Rashbam, how could you have a Havamina that Bezdin then would tell him, oh, you know what I really meant? That I had a star and I lost it. Isn't that another taina? He already said one thing. He said, no one said anything to me. And now you want to say that, oh, Bezdin, you'd have a half minute. Bezdin would say to him, what? No, really, you had a star and lost it? Is Mechanish the Rashbam that if it's not contradictory, it's just explanatory, we would say it. It would not be a case of Toyin v'chayz v'toyin. Like remember we spoke this out. By Eidim, it's Kivin Shehirgit Shuvein Chayzer Magid. By Eidim, once they testify, they can't go ahead and testify. By a person making a claim, once he makes a claim, he can make a new claim. This would not be a new claim. This would be an extension of the old claim. That's the Chiddush. So the Chiddush of the Mishnah that says Chazaka Sheni Matayin Ein Chazaka is since Pesach Pichal Iling, I might think that Bezdin goes ahead and makes the claim for him, that maybe he had a star and lost it. Kamash Malon, we don't make that claim. That's the Chiddush of the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, An of Siman. Rav Anan Shokol Bitka, so the ayin is, we're going to have three cases, and the ayiv stands for Rav Anan. Rav Anan Shokol Bitka Ba'are. Rav Anan, what happened was, his land got flooded. And there had been a wall of demarcation between his field and his friend's field. Now, what happened? He went ahead and he built a wall. But unfortunately for him, the wall was, I guess it's an easement, right? It went into his friend's property. So he built the wall on his friend's property, not his. So basically he stole land. Basically he stole land. Now, the person whose property it was on now comes and makes a claim about Rav Anan's taking away his property. So they came in front of Rav Nachman. Amalei, Rav Nachman told Rav Anan, Zil Hadar, go ahead and return his property. Fred Gemara v'achziki li, I was machzik. What? I was machzik. Let's see Rashbam, guys. V'achziki shebanisi kaisel al piv. I built a wall with his what? With his allowing it. Ubit savasoi, and him commanding kidam lekamei. The asa b'saye guda b'hadoy. He helped me build the wall. Ukimanda amali leichazik v'kni dami. So in other words, since he helped me build the wall, it's like he told me leichazik v'kni, go make a chazaka. In other words, it's not pshat over here chazaka shalishanim. I think this is chazaka that I worked it. In other words, he told me to go be koine it. I was koine it. V'achziki li. So Amalei Kiman, like who? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yishmael, the Amri Kol Befon of La'al Tahavi Chazaka. Okay, I guess I'm wrong. It doesn't mean like the Kenyan Chazaka. It means the Chazaka we're speaking about Shalosh Shanim. So now anyone that if you do it, Rabbi Yehuda said if you do it in front of the person, immediately it's the Chazaka right away. And Rabbi Shmuel is going to say later on it's the Chazaka right away. So what happened? Rav Anan, the field got flooded. He knocked down the wall. He went ahead and he built the wall on his neighbor's property. The neighbor helped him build the wall. And therefore he wants, even though Rav Nachman told Rav Anan to go ahead and return it, so he has a claim. 1 second. He helped me build it. It's like he's Michael he's giving it to me. Says the Gemara, says, and what about 3 years? You don't need 3 years. When a person goes ahead in front of you and helps you right away, it's like he told you immediately. It's a chazaka. So first of all, the halacha is not like that. Amalei. So therefore go return it. Feg v'ha'achol, says Rav Anan. He was Michael. The asa v'saya biguda bahadoi. He went ahead and he aided me in rebuilding this wall. So isn't the action of him aiding me build this wall enough of a reason to show that what? That it's mine? So Amalei, Rav Nachman told Rav Anan, Mechila b'toisu. It's a Mechila b'tois. How do you know it's a Mechila b'tois? At gufcha ihavi yodata lo yavarata. If you would have known it was on his property, you wouldn't have built it. Ki hechi de atli havi yadat, just like you didn't know. Hunami lo havi yoda. He also didn't know. So it's a good. He helped you build it, thinking that what? That the wall was on your property, Ranan. He wouldn't have helped you build it on his property. And now when I guess he had a surveyor come and said, 1 second, if he's got 5 feet into your property, he's saying, get off. He built it. He built it thinking it was on your property. Therefore, Rav Nachman told Rav Anan to go return it. That's the halacha. That's the ayin in the word anav. Okay? So we're going to have another case, another halacha l'maisa case of that transpired similar to this. Rav Kahana, that's the nun, Rav Kahana. Shakal bitka ba'arei. So it flooded his land. Azal hada guda ba'ara deloy didei. He went ahead and he rebuilt the wall on a land that wasn't his, on the base. He went ahead and rebuilt the land on a wall that wasn't his. Asla Kamei Rav Yehuda, they came in front of the great Rav Yehuda. Azal Isi Trey Sadi, he brought 2 witnesses. Again, the person saying it's my property, guys, right? In other words, this is the neighbor. And he's making a claim of Kahana to remove the land, and he's bringing evidence as to how much land Rav Kahana transgressed when he went into his land. Trespassed, not transgressed, trespassed. How much he would trespass when he went to his land. So, Azlaisi Tresadi, Chadama, Harti Oitsaisa oil, 2 rows. The Chad Amar, Tlas Oitsaisi oil, 3 rows. So you have conflicting testimony on 1. You have a full testimony on 2. You have a conflicting testimony on 1. Amalei, so Rav Yehuda told Rav Kahana, Zil Shlim, Tarti Migoy Tlas. Go ahead and pay back, because 2 is Migoy Tlas, is within 3. So in other words, return 2 rows to this individual, your neighbor who you trespassed. Amalei Kiman. So Rav Kahana said to Rav Yehuda, like who? Whose psak are you being soymech on? Again, it's interesting. This person brought Rav Yehuda to din, but Rav Kahana certainly is an Amoira who's capable of arguing with Rav Yehuda. It's not like you go into a dayan and you go to a dayan and you ask Rav Moshe, who do you hold like? Who are you mechutz to open your mouth? Ask Rav Moshe who you hold like. But Rav Kahana is saying, like, who do you hold like, right? So Kiman, and over here the Rashbam adds the words Amalei. Amalei, Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Like Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Now, what's the problem over here, fellas? It seems to be straightforward. The problem is that they're conflicting. One says 2, one says 3. Even though they're both admitting 2, but they're conflicting. Is it possible to say, therefore, you don't have Eidus, that Eidus Mucheshes? Is it possible, therefore, to say it's Eidus Mucheshes, which is the taina that he wants to go ahead and make a claim? He's going to make what? This taina. Says the Gemara, who are you going to? Like Reb Shimon ben Elazar, the Tanya. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, like Nechlu Beisham Beis Hillel, Al Shtei Kitei Eidim. 2 separate groups, 4 people, 2 separate groups, right? Sha'achas Emeres Mana, V'achas Emeres Messiah. One says you owe 100, the other one says you owe 200. Sheyesh B'chal Messiah Mana. So in that case, they agree that you're going to have to pay 100. This guy claims 100, says 200. No, but you certainly owe 100. Good. There's no difference. Why? Because you have 2 separate edus. Where's the machlokes Beisham and Behillel? Al kat achas, on 1 set of edus. 2 people, 1 set of edus. She'echadom and mana, ve'echadom and Messiah. One says you owe 100, one says you owe 200. She'beisam and onim nechlok dusan, that the edus you divide it, meaning it's not acceptable edus. They weaken each other. Ubeisol and yesh b'chal Messiah mana, you have 100. Okay, so according to Beis Hillel, it doesn't make a difference whether it's 2 sets of edus or 1 set of edus. And this is Rav Yehuda's psak. He's passing like Beis Hillel, like in Beis Shammai, that even in 1 set of edus, even though one's saying 2 and one's saying 1, right? in this case, one saying 2, one saying 3, we're going to go ahead and accept the testimony, and therefore Rav Yehuda told Rav Kahana, go ahead and return the land. He goes ahead and he said, return the land. That's what he said. So now, Amalei, so Rav Kahana told Rav Yehuda, for my sina lecha igrata mimarava, I'll bring you a letter from Eretz Yisrael, the Ein Halach Reb Shimon ben Elazar. There's only 2 places in Shas that disappears. That I'll bring you in Igeres. The other places in Sanhedrin Chavtes. I thought I'd be able to. I looked up at my girl this Yom. He didn't say anything on it. Usually, it's very interesting. In other words, he didn't say they held in Eretz Yisrael not like you. This is in Bavel. He said, I'll bring you a letter from Eretz Yisrael that the halacha is not like Shimon ben Elazar, meaning when you have 2 Eidim conflicting, even though Yesh B'chal Messiah Mana, right? You don't agree. So therefore, who I didn't over here, since one said 2, one said 3, we should go ahead, said Rav Kahana, and not accept it, and therefore I wouldn't have to return the land. That's his claim. So therefore, said Amalei, so Rav Yehuda said to Rav Kahana, say, okay, when the letter arrives, bring it to me. But I'm giving you my psak, right? This is my psak. You say other people passing otherwise. When the letter arrives, you go ahead and you give that psak. Guys, good? Okay, so that was the case of the Nun, Rav Kahana. Now we have a base. Ahu Gavra, Didor Bikashta Ba'aliyasa Arbashana. He lived in an attic in a town of Kashata, or a place, for 4 years. Asa Mare de Besa came along what? The owner, 4 years later. Ashkeche, he found him there. Amalei, my boyis bahai Besa, what are you doing in my house? Amalei, mi planyo zavinta, I bought it from so-and-so. The zavna minach, who bought it from you? In other words, I bought it from Shimon, who bought it from you, Ruvain. So Harry's in the attic. Ruvain comes to tells Harry, what are you doing in my attic? Harry says, I bought it from Shimon, who I assume bought it from you. Rashi Mama says he doesn't know for sure he bought it, but I assume he bought it from you. Asal Kamed Rav Chia, he came in front of Rav Chia, but the case was born in front of Rav Chia. Amalei, so Rav Chia said to Harry, he is the chasade didarba ihu dezavnamine. If you go ahead and have Adim, that Shimon, who you claim you bought it from, lived there. Vafilu chad even one day. I'll put it in your hand. So you're claiming that you bought it from Shimon, who bought it from Ruvain. If you go ahead and bring a proof, since you have chazaka, guys, you have a chazaka that takes care of Ruvain. All you have to prove that what it was Shimon's. If you have a proof that it was Shimon's, that he lived there, you're good. That's all you have to do is prove. Even a day, it's good. Yours, ask Ruvain's taina. What are you doing there? He's been there for 4 years. All he has to prove that he bought it, right? Guys, he doesn't have to prove that Shimon bought it from Ruvain. He just has to prove that Shimon lived there. So he says, if you have a proof that Shimon lived there, that's all he writes. It said, "Did darbe iu the zavmina." He doesn't have to know what Shimon bought from Ruvain. All he has to know is Shimon lived there. And if you have Adis that Shimon lived there, that will be enough for his chazaka that he'd been there 4 years in this attic and establishes his presence there, and it will be his. That's what he said. Now, Rav was the nephew of Rab Chia, and he called him Chavivi. Or anytime you have in Shas Chavivi, that's Rab Chia. Rav says, and then, in fact, we have very often Rab Chia by Rav. Rav had a son, he named after Rab Chia. So, Amar Rav, have Yisibna Kamei de Chavivi. Rav says, I was sitting in front of Rab Chia when he gave this besak. The Imri law, the Chi Ein Adam Osei Likach V'Limcha B'Layla. Now, is the possibility that Shimon, right? That Shimon bought it from Ruvain at night, and Ruvain flipped it. In other words, how do you know that Shimon didn't buy it at night, that it's not his? In other words, you need Shimon to be there. Maybe Shimon went ahead, he bought it, and he sold it. You have no raya, and he sold it back. He sold it to Ruvain. So again, you have no raya that Shimon, that just because Shimon wasn't on it, that he didn't have it, because he could have bought it and sold it, right? So Rav's claim is Why do you need Harry to go ahead and prove that Shimon was there? Shimon could have at night bought it and sold it, right? If you look at the Rashbam. Right before it gets wide. The limchar la'achar, and to sell it to somebody else. That he can make a profit that night. Atzmoi. And we should go ahead and use this taina, the tanin lekeach, right? That we're tainin lekeach. In other words, guys, we're not going to answer this question. We will be tainin lekeach. Usually, when a guy buys something, if we can go ahead and forward a claim for him, we would do it. So even though L'chayri could have forwarded the claim, why do I have to prove Shimon? Why do I have to prove Shimon was there? Maybe Shimon bought it and sold it. Maybe Shimon bought it and sold it, right? It could sell it. All we know is that I bought it from Shimon. I bought it from Shimon. Now you have to. Why do you have to prove that Shimon that it wasn't Shimon? Maybe it was Shimon's, and Shimon in one night bought it and sold it. So l'chayra, there's a taina to answer Reb Chia's need to go ahead and prove Shimon's bilus that he had been there. That's what Rav asks. The Gemara doesn't answer that, and the Gemara says, and the Reb Ashram says, despite the fact the Gemara not answering Rav's taina, the halachos like Reb Chia, you would have to prove at least that Shimon was there one night. You'd have to prove that Shimon was there at least one day, that he owned there one day. So says the Gemara continues, v'chazizte l'daite, and says the Gemara, I saw the dasa Reb Chia that he understood my words, because why? What did he do? He then forwarded a taina that would have worked. If Harry would have said, I saw Shimon buy it from you, Ruvain. I saw Shimon buy it from you, Ruvain. So in other words, Rav Chia went ahead and said, Shimon, you got to bring, Harry, you got to bring proof Shimon lived there one day, or else your taina is not a taina. We're not going to give you the land. Says Rav, why don't you give him a land? Why does he have to prove Shimon? Maybe Shimon went ahead, bought it, and sold it. Maybe Shimon went ahead and bought it and sold it. Gemara doesn't answer that. However, I saw that Reb Chia was working along a way to figure out what? I saw that to go ahead and figure out along the way that maybe there is a taina that he would not have to bring a proof. What's that taina? If Harry would have said, I, Harry, saw Shimon buy it from you, then he wouldn't have to bring a proof. Why? Migu, that Harry could have said, I bought it from you, Ruvain. Guys, remember, he's in that attic 4 years. He's got Shani Chazaka. If he would have told Ruvain, who said, what are you doing on my land? If he would have said, I bought it from you, it would be his. After 3 years, you don't need the star. Says the Gemara beautifully. If he would have said, I, Harry, saw you, Ruvain, sell it to Shimon, and I bought it from him, he'd be believed. Migu, he could have said, I bought it from Ruvain myself, which he would have been believed. Beautiful. Says the Gemara. If Harry would have said, in front of me, Shimon purchased it from you, Ruvain, mehimna, then Harry would be believed. Migu di boy amalei, migu that what? And Harry himself could have said to Ruvain, Ano zavanto minach, I bought it from you. Amarava says, Rabbi Kavase Reb Chia, it's mistaba like Reb Chia, that you have to bring proof, at least for Shimon's ownership. Diktani, haba misham Yerusha, right? If someone goes ahead and comes for Yerusha, Amishna. Someone comes for Yerusha. Ain't it tzarech taina? What does that mean? What are you doing on my land? He goes, what are you doing on my land? I'm on the land that my father bought from you. He doesn't have to go ahead and he doesn't have to go ahead and bring a raya that the father bought it. All he has to bring a raya that his father lived there. And that's exactly Rabbi Chia's din. Guys, again, one more time. A Yairish is not expected to know the business dealings of his father. So, what are you doing on my land? His father died. I'm living on the land that my father bought from you. He can't say produce a star. It's after, but again, he's not supposed to know any of that. All he has to do is to prove it, is to go ahead, what? And have Adis that the day that his father died, his father was on that land. Same thing over here. Harry just has to prove that Shimon was on that land, and that'll be enough. So that's that's what we're going to make that diak. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara beautifully. Tanya Kabase, the Mishnah is a raya to Reb Chia. The Mishnah is a raya to Reb Chia. What's the raya from the Mishnah to Reb Chia? What does that Mishnah say? Haba Mishum Yerusha. If someone is claiming Mishum Yerusha that his father bought it, ain't it tzarich taina? He does not have to go ahead and prove that his father bought it. Taina hudlei boy. He doesn't have to prove that his father bought it. Haraya boy, but he would have to prove that his father lived there. He'd have to prove his father lived there. Just turn back the page, guys. Just turn back the page. Look at the Rashbam. Look at the Rashbam. Ain't it tzarich taina? The last Rashbam in the Mishnah. Ain't it tzarich taina loymar heich bo liad aviv? He doesn't have to explain how it came to the hands of his father. The aim of them baki b'karkoyis aviv. No person is an expert in the kark of his father. Heich bo liyado, how it came there. Umiu raya be'edim boi sheroyes aviv huchzik bo yom echad. He would need edim that what his father was muchzik there one day. So again, taina not, raya yes. You hear the difference. It's a beautiful difference. Beautiful difference. Okay. So l'choira, now we have a beautiful raya from a Mishnah, right? Now the Gemara is going to slug it up. Hey, what do you do? As soon as you understand something, that's the job of the Gemara. Okay, so you want to bring me a raya from the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, you have no raya. So says the Gemara. The Dilma says, ain't it tzarich taina? Taina udlui boy. Back in the Gemara, he doesn't need a taina, but haraya boy, but he needs a raya. Says the Gemara, no, raya boy, but taina boy. He doesn't need it. What's your diak? He doesn't need a taina. Maybe he doesn't. Not only doesn't need a taina, he doesn't need a raya. In other words, just because the Mishnah didn't say he doesn't need anything. Now, what's the diak? He doesn't need anything. The Mishnah didn't say he doesn't need anything. It said he doesn't need a taina, but it doesn't need a raya. Iba yasema, right? And Iba yasema, and here's another slug up to the raya, another slug up to the raya. Shiny like keach, like shadi zuze bichti. In other words, inachinami guys, the raya from the Mishnah is a good raya. By a Yairish, you'd have to bring a raya. But a guy who buys land, right, maybe he doesn't have to bring a raya. Why in the world would the guy who bought the attic from Shimon go ahead and be nichnis into a shaila? He doesn't throw away his money for nothing. He probably had Shimon, show me a title that the land belongs to you, and I'll buy it from you. That doesn't exist by a Yairish. So even if you're going to tell me a Yairish must go ahead and bring a raya, it's no raya to our case. Because our case, maybe you don't have to bring a raya. Why? Because the guy's not going to throw his money in the wind. So of course he knows Shimon owned the land. All we're saying is the raya you want to bring is not a raya. That's all. I'm not saying the din. The din ain't achinami, he has to bring a raya. But the raya you want to bring from our Mishnah that he has to bring a raya, there's no raya. Our Mishnah is a raya to a Yairish that he has to bring a raya that his daddy was on the land for a day. But maybe by a mechira, where a guy who was there for 4 years in an attic bought it from this guy who said he bought it from you, would make sure that the guy he bought it from, he owned the land, that he has some title. Show me before I spend my money. So you have no raya. Again, we're not questioning the din, guys. We're just slugging up the raya, the proof to the din. We're slugging it up. Iboyalahu. Another case. Niraba mahu. Niraba. Let's say he's seen on the land. Let's say Shimon is on the land and he's checking out the dimensions. He's going to Edmont and he's checking out the dimensions. He's on the land. He's checking out on the land. He's surveying the land. Would you need Adis that he lived there or not if he's checking out the land? Right? Amar Abaya, that's Adis. If he's checking out the land, that's a good raya that it's his. And therefore, Harry would believe that he bought from Shimon because we had Adis that Shimon was surveying the land. Rav Amma, Ovid Inish, the sire Arav Leisavin. It could be he checked out the land and afterwards he decided not to buy it. So therefore you have no raya, and therefore you need Adis that he lived there, and it won't be raya that he checked it out.